Goodness. Oh my goodness. All right, guys. Sorry for that. I had some real issues with my interwebs. So, so this live was supposed to start 40 minutes ago, and so now everything's been resolved, and I am here. We got a lot of things to talk about today. I've had a lot of really good questions. This has been a really great week, guys. Just so you know, hey, this is my first week on this book on the market, Practical Guide to Breathwork. And I'm just going to kind of give you a little rundown of what's in the book. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, I've had a lot of questions about, can a person do Wim Hof method and Buteyko at the same time, or is that okay, or how do these things work together? We'll talk about those as well. And we'll talk about, I got a question about getting headaches when doing certain breathing techniques. So we'll talk about that. First of all, Practical Guide for Breathwork. If you haven't already got it, it's on Amazon and on my website, midwesternmethod.com. You can check that out. I'm really happy with the reception. Things are really going well. And so I just want to thank all of you guys. For those of you who have purchased this, thank you for your purchase. If you haven't, I would check it out. This is, just so you know, the first half of the book is basically concerned with, the first half of the book is mostly about what I call the modern human condition. So it's a strange thing. Our biology and physiology, there's a mismatch between the world that we live in and the interior workings of our body and mind. And so the first half of the book talks about, first of all, I give you basically my story, how I discovered, how this sort of things worked. And it's something that I don't go into great detail, but I definitely, you'll get to know me a lot better reading this book. So after you read this book, you'll know me a lot better. So I talk a lot about my own personal journey to discover breath work and all the different facets of breath work. I talk about the autonomic nervous system, how breathing actually affects the autonomic nervous system. Also, a lot of times we use words like, okay, I'm going to control my nervous system or control this or that using my breath. And I really dissect what that means. And I try to put it in a really, and hence the name, practical. I try to be really practical with it so that I avoid anything that's, the esoteric. And I just basically tell you exactly, hey, when we say you're controlling aspects of your health with your breath, what does that mean and how do you do it? How does that work? And I even have a little section in here called the Breathwork Decoder ring. And essentially, I just break down the basic elements of how breathing affects pretty much everything. So breathing affects your autonomic nervous system, which affects 90% of your bodily functions, and which affects everything else. So, whether you like it or not, your breathing is affecting your health. And so this book is focused on that. I had a lot of people think that I was going to write it about Wim Hof method, but this is not about Wim Hof method. I do mention Wim in the book, and he's a part of my life and part of my journey. But really, this is focused specifically on how we can break what I describe as the modern human condition, which is oftentimes full of stress and anxiety, how we can also take control of our breathing and therefore take control of our life. The second half, and so basically we're talking about half of the book is describing basically really explaining these principles in really easy to understand ways. And then the other half of the book is dedicated 100% to different techniques. So it's the book that I wish I would have had when I started all these years ago. Basically, I have some charts and some graphs to kind of help you with with learning. And essentially, I give you a toolbox. So I really want to give a person a toolbox, something that they can use the rest of their life. Okay, I'm having a hard time sleeping, or I just got done working out. I'm about to go work out. What's the best thing I can do to get into the state that I'm looking to be in? And then also, how can I use CO2 and O2, right? So how can I use oxygen and carbon dioxide? How can I use these? Because our breathing affects these things, right? How can I use my breathing to use these to enhance athletic performance, or to improve my overall health? Or also, one of the things that we can do by affecting our CO2 tolerance is we can reduce our overall reaction to anxiety and stress. So basically making ourselves more resilient, simply because we have made ourselves more adapted to CO2. So the average person overbreathes, and I'm not going to go through every little bit, but essentially this book is out on my website, midwesternmethod.com, and I'm really proud of it, and we've had a great reception. It charted in the top 100 on Amazon in the category of alternate healing. I got to 25th place. So I was really, really excited about that. So I just want to thank everybody for your support. And if you haven't already purchased the book, definitely do. It is a really, it's not a textbook. It's not like I cram tons and tons of science into your brain, but I give you enough. Like, a person needs to know a certain amount of the science to make sense of breath work, and I give you that. And then from there, I give you a whole bunch of techniques that you can try, instructions on different techniques for different things you're looking for, and so I think you're really going to like it. So basically, that is the book. Today, I'm talking a little bit about. I had a question, and I get this question a lot. When it comes to, there's all these different schools of breathing techniques out there, and there's different philosophies. And even something I touch on in the book is that experts disagree. And so you may talk to two different experts in the same field, and they may disagree on something pretty substantial, and they use their techniques or whatever it is, and they can still get great results in their clients. And so that's just kind of something you're going to see everywhere. But the question often arises when it comes to superventilation breath work. So, and it's usually specifically when they're talking about Wim Hof method breath work. So the breathing that Wim Hof does. So superventilation and Buteyko style breath work. Now, if you're not familiar with these, essentially, one is what we call superventilation. So it involves a lot of heavy breathing, but that would be more of the Wim Hof method. Buteyko breathing is really on the other end of that scale. It involves breathing light. It involves proper breathing. Okay, so it does involve breathing into the abdomen and in using and engaging the proper muscles in breathing, but it's not one where you're going to do a lot of deep breathing. In fact, deep breathing and heavy breathing is something that is discouraged in that school. So a lot of people see these two, and to be honest, I've got a lot of friends that they literally only teach these two techniques, and that's all they do. And it's like, well, how can these two techniques, how can you reconcile these two things? And it's not really hard. It really isn't very hard. And let me just give you an idea of why this is not a difficult thing. Because when it comes to Buteyko style breath work, it is more of a philosophy of how you breathe throughout the day. Yes, there are specific techniques that you're going to do, and you're going to sit down, you're going to focus and things like that. But it really focuses on retraining your body. And just actually going back on something that I talk about in my book, it talks about how to basically increase your tolerance to CO2. So when you do that, when you have a higher tolerance to CO2, a lot of good things happen. Okay, so it's just going to benefit you in just pretty much every single way. Now, Wim Hof method technique is focused on some different things. And the thing is, both of these things work really well together. You're not going to sit around and walk around all day doing Wim Hof method breath work. So whenever people, because a lot of people read, for instance, Oxygen Advantage. So they'll read Patrick McEwen's Oxygen Advantage, where he talks about, and basically what he did in that book was it was awesome. And what he does with his Oxygen Advantage classes is great. He took Buteyko and basically took the main principles and made it a little bit more applicable and easier to teach. And a lot of people have read that book and they'll say, hey, it seems to contradict, but it doesn't, because, and you can even ask Patrick McEwen this, okay? So at first he was a little bit skeptical of Wim Hof method breath work, but now he's not, because the thing is, you just do Wim Hof method style breath work for maybe 15 to 20 minutes in a day. The rest of the day is dedicated, if you're into Buteyko, the rest of the day is dedicated to breathing in through the nose, avoiding mouth breathing, you basically doing other exercises to train your CO2 tolerance. This is, for instance, in my book, I give you some of the protocols that I use for athletes that I train. And if I'm training an athlete with breath work, I'm going to train both ends. I'm going to train the person to increase their oxygen carrying capacity, which is something that superventilation breath work does. Wim Hof method breath work is a superventilation technique, so that would count there. So that does some cool things that way for athletic performance. But I'm also going to train a person to enhance their CO2 tolerance. And I'm using a lot of the principles that Patrick McEwen talks about in Oxygen Advantage. We want to be mindful of the Bohr Effect. And so the Bohr Effect, simply put, and I think I'll make a video on this because it's worth a nice short explanation on YouTube. But the Bohr Effect, essentially, it describes hemoglobin's tendency to hang on to oxygen cells or oxygen molecules or atoms, right? It holds on to them and it won't release them into tissue. So that's if you have low levels of CO2. So we want to build our CO2 tolerance so we can have higher levels of CO2. And so that's something that you want to train for both ends. You want to make it so that whenever you're competing, when you're exercising, that it takes longer for you to have to huff and puff and huff and puff, because that means that's that much longer, first of all, that you're not dying, on the ground, but it's also, you're getting that much better oxygen to your tissues where they're needed because you can tolerate all that CO2. You're not having to blow it all off. Now, that is incredibly simplified, and I am tired. I've had a very long week, and so I probably can explain that much better in a different video. Not to mention, I just had all this technical problems with my internet at the house. So so I guess I'm a little flustered too. But basically, that would be a basic, answer to that question. I highly recommend both. Okay, and this is something that I really want everyone to understand when it comes to breath work, when it comes to biohacking or fitness and health. There is no one single path. There's a quote, I think it was St. Thomas Aquinas once said, beware the man who only reads one book. Okay, so there's a lot of different things that you can do. There's a lot of different techniques and different things, and the thing is, it's going to differ as far as effectiveness. It's going to be different just depending on who you are. There's so much biodiversity in this world that it's going to be impossible for anyone to say, do this, therefore all people will have the same result, because we're different. It's not a cop-out to say that. It's something that I've been learning about a lot more lately, especially, but we all have a lot of differences, and this will manifest in breath work. It also manifests in other things. But here is one thing that we generally have in common, and that is for most of us, Wim Hof method and Buteyko can be perfect friends. I think they complement each other very, very well. So Hopefully that answers your question. And if and later on, I may make a video about the combination of the two, but they go well together. Okay, so the next question I had, I've actually had it quite a bit over the years, and I think I might have had, let's see here, yeah, headaches. So River Boy, he says, evening lady from the UK. Yes, headaches are something that occur when doing breath work through the nose. Okay, so and this is something that a lot of people have issues with. So first of all, and I think it's also specifically through the nose for a lot of people, but there are some times that you're going to have issues with headaches and whatnot, and some of this has to do with the changes in pressure. Okay, so that some of the changes in pressure that you can have whenever you do certain breathing techniques. Another thing that can sometimes happen is if, and it doesn't matter if you're going through the nose or the mouth, both ways you can get headaches from the environment. So in the Midwest right now, it's turning autumn. So the leaves are falling and allergens are out for a lot of people. And this means that just simply doing some certain breath work techniques, and of course, superventilation. Anytime we're doing superventilation, so whenever we're doing like Wim Hof method is a superventilation technique. There's a lot of different ones out there that don't really have names, but essentially, anytime you're doing heavy breathing, there's a lot of things in the air that can irritate your sinuses, and sometimes as simple as a sinus headache. Other times it's because you've pressurized a little too much in the head or something like that. And then you got to remember your sinuses. I mean, there's just an enormous amount of your head that is dedicated to sinuses. So this can also be in your ears. I've heard some people, a lot of people report, and I've had this happen too, where they have maybe their ears feel weird or ringing, or they have like even a clogged feeling in their ear after like an intense breathwork session. And these are all normal. They do happen, but just because they're normal doesn't mean they're great to have happen. And so if this is happening to you, what you're going to want to do is dial back the intensity of the breath work that you're doing. And this comes down to also, this may be a form, issue, an issue of form, or it could just be that you're a little too gung-ho. I know whenever I first discovered superventilation, it was because I was practicing Wim Hof method breath work, and man, I would sometimes just sit there, just insanely fast, or I would just really strain myself in some way, and that can cause pain, and that can cause some issues that are just kind of problems. But these things generally pass. They are not things that are going to stay with you unless you continue to push yourself or strain yourself in that way. Another thing, I'm just going to kind of demonstrate one thing that I would highly recommend, and this is something that I do every single day, and I describe 2 different variations of Buteyko in my book, but essentially, and just a simple explanation of Buteyko, the kind that I do in the morning, I take my hands and I go all the way up, and you can't see this, but my hands are going to be open, and I will bring them down, and then they're going to be closed. But what I'm going to do is it's all through the nose. So and this is also known as Bellows Breath. But what it does, it's awesome for those of us who do have sinus issues. It's also great. I always do it to clear my nose, if just in case there's gunk in it. But one thing I love is that it opens up my nasal cavities, and it lets me do my superventilation that I'm going to do. Whether it's generally I do Wim Hof method every single day, right? So it's either going to be that or some variation of Wim Hof method or some variation of superventilation. And so what I'm going to do is I usually do about 3 sets of Buteyko, in the morning. And that usually gets me to where I'm kind of awake. It It feels good. I like doing this style better. There's another style where it's not, you're not using your arms at all. But I like using the kinds with my arms, especially because, first of all, I like this in the morning. I like to get the blood moving, and it's great for mobility. But I just like how it's so simple. And then your nose is open and you're ready to go. And then you can do your superventilation. And I do all nasal superventilation anymore. You know, when I do Wim Hof method style breath work, it's almost 100% in through the nose, out through the mouth. And that's how I do it. So that is a fix or a workaround. For some people, it's going to depend on the environment that you're in even more. It may be that you need to get a humidifier or think about other stuff like that. And now, it may also mean if you're getting headaches and they are not sinus related, you need to think about, okay, well, obviously try to scratch everything off the list, but it could also be something you need to see your doctor about, but if it's being caused from breath work, normally it's something related to the sinuses. That is by far the most common thing amongst people who are doing breath work, is to have some form of a sinus headache or something connected to the sinuses, like your ears are connected. And that's generally the big issue there. All right, let's see here. Okay, so those are the questions that I came prepared to talk about today. I got a late start on the day with this live, so I have meetings that I have to go to. I'm still teaching, so I have a bunch of things to do. But let's take a quick look at the questions here. Is breathing on, okay, Rocky, hey, Rocky, is breathing on an empty stomach better than after a meal? And by the way, I have your book and I'm halfway through it. Love it. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And if you guys don't mind leaving a positive review on Amazon, that would be a really big help to me. But yeah, Rocky, let's talk about that. So yes, the answer is breath work on an empty stomach is generally better than breath work on a full stomach. And that is for two reasons. One is that if you have a full stomach, it is difficult because you have a physical barrier down there, and that can interfere with full deep breathing. And I think we all know that, right? There's some discomfort that can come from that, and it can upset your stomach and things like that. The other reason is that whenever you're doing breath work, much of breath work relies on your ability to change the pH in a relatively predictable way of your blood. And your pH is already changing whenever you're digesting. So there's a lot of things that are just going to have to naturally take place. I guess I'll say number 3. There's a third one that's kind of big, and that is this. If you're doing breath work after you're eating, you have to think about what that breath work is also going to do. So if you're doing some kind of an activation technique after you eat, what will that do? Well, that's going to take you out of the digesting state, right? Because if you're activating, you're going into that more of a fight or flight, that more sympathetic dominant state. That is not good for digestion. So what we want to do, ideally, before you eat, I recommend before you eat to focus on slow breathing. So bringing down your stress level, bringing down your anxiety, really trying to get out of the sympathetic dominant state into a parasympathetic dominant state, because that is the state that you need to be in order to digest that food. And so if you have a full stomach and you do some breath work, the only thing I would say to do is just try to focus on slow breathing and staying in that parasympathetic state. You'd never want to do anything to activate your system if you've just eaten a meal, because you want to be able to digest that food. All right. So let's see here. Yeah, Zach, I totally see what you mean. Zach says, I didn't even realize I could deal with stress in a tangible way until I started practicing breath work. Me too. Now I'm just amazed that it's not more commonly practiced. Yeah, and I was blown away by that too. Once I realized it was more than just a magic spell, because I think at first, if when you first find out about breath work, it's almost like there's some kind of incantation. I'll magically do this many breaths or this kind of breathing style, and then magically this thing changes. And it's not like that. It is, I mean, it feels like magic. It feels just incredible, right? That you have this capacity to do it. But for me, I kind of sometimes I compare it to discovering I had a third hand. It's this tool that I could have been using this whole time to do really valuable work on myself, but I just didn't realize it was there. And I think a lot of it is because it's been enshrouded in mysticism, esoteric practices, or sometimes things that just look scary to people. In my book, I talk a little bit about holotropic breathing, which has been a big help for hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and I recommend it. It's a wonderful thing, but I don't recommend it for every single person. And I don't recommend that if you're into it and you've got people that you're trying to say, hey, you should work on breath work. I don't recommend that you would ever show your family or friends videos of people who are practicing the holotropic breath work because it looks like an exorcism. I mean, you can go on YouTube and find these videos about holotropic, like documentaries and things about holotropic breath work. And, if a person has never heard of breath work, if if you're trying to turn them on to, hey, guess what? We have these innate abilities that are just really incredible. And it has to do with breathing. Oh, look at holotropic breath work. They're going to be like, they look like they're in pain. And a lot of times, their faces are wincing and they're just like, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing uncontrollably. And in the right context, if you understand what these things are, it's not bad. It is what it is. But there's been, but a lot of times a person will see that and they'll say, man, I don't want anything to do with that. So I think that for the longest time has gotten people afraid maybe, or they just didn't want to get into it. And so that is one of the things that I really want to send out. And this is a common message that I send out to everybody that I can, is that, hey, did you know that your breathing is connected? There's a part of your brain, the part of your brain that allows you to control your breathing. It's a two-way conduit, so that you can send signals to your nervous system and receive signals, right? We all understand what it's like to receive a signal from our nervous system, maybe a fight or flight, especially someone, pulls out in front of you in traffic, or you get some really bad news. You're going to inhale, you're going to breathe in your chest, you're going to start thumping your chest, then you start breathing heavy. I mean, you're naturally going into all this sympathetic dominant state. That's what we call bottom up signaling. But we can do top down signaling. And that's something that separates us from pretty much every other creature on this planet. We can say, okay, I know that I'm stressed out. I know I'm stressed out, and I know that I'm going to have to go through a stressful time. But guess what? I also know that it's not going to help me at all to have adrenaline and cortisol and all these stress hormones and my heart thumping 24/7. I know that as well. So using what tool do I have? Well, I can use my breath. There's certain techniques, and and just quite simply, if I start slowing down my breath, if I start putting it into my abdomen as opposed to up in my chest, if I start inhaling through the nose as opposed to breathing through my mouth, all of these things are going to send signals to my nervous system that say, chill, calm down. Now, will it completely alleviate all of stress? Sometimes, but not all the time. And so, but what it will do consistently, if you really practice it on a regular basis, you can bring that level of stress down to something that's manageable. And in many cases, you can get to sleep. You can wake up feeling refreshed so that you can actually face the stressors in your life as opposed to just being a victim to it all. So you're an active participant in this stress situation, and you can say, okay, I'm just going to let it happen, or I'm going to play an active role. I'm going to regulate my breathing, and I'm going to see the benefits. All right, so let's see here. I am running up against the clock, but I'm going to just kind of scan through a few here. Let's see here. And if I don't get to your question today, every week I do this. I'm trying to do this every week on at 2:00 on Fridays, Eastern Standard Time. Do I plan on doing any Wim Hof method live training in Northern Indiana in the near future? Here's the thing. Once I can get back on the road, right now it's just kind of an awkward time to put on workshops. There's a lot of investment involved and it's kind of hard to know if anybody's going to show up or not. And so I'm looking for after the first of the year to put on some workshops, and I will be going to Indianapolis is one of the places that I'm going to come back to. I haven't been to Indianapolis, Indiana since I think the last time I was there was, I think it was early 2019, maybe, or no, I don't even think it was that. I think it might have been 2019 at some point, but I haven't been there in a long time, and I need to get back to Indiana. I'm also going to be heading up to Michigan as soon as things clear up. So I'm going to be in, let's see, where was it? It's either Sterling it's Lansing, Michigan. So I'm going to be coming up there. But I don't have a date set because I just want to make sure that, that these things actually can happen. And I had a lot of cancellations, and it's really frustrating when you have these things and you have a whole bunch of people and you have to coordinate everything. So I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to wait until I get some better. I'm doing a lot of online training and stuff like that. But for workshops, I'm kind of waiting until I get a better handle on what's going to happen here. Let's see. So, hey, let's take a look here at C. Hi, I have chronic. Wait a minute, it just jumped on me. It jumped on me again. I have chronic asthma, take lots of medications, and go to the hospital every year because of attacks I've been doing every year since I was an infant. Can breathwork help? Which type is best? And then he says, I've been trying Wim Hof is what I'm assuming that you meant to say. Breathwork is something that can help you. Here's the thing. So it's really hard for me to say this is the best kind of breathwork for you. However, I would highly recommend, Wim Hof method is great. I would also recommend, specifically if you have asthma, Buteyko breathwork is actually, the original point of Buteyko breathwork was to treat asthma in Russia. So I would recommend that. You can read the book, The Oxygen Advantage. You can go to, I don't know if they have online courses for that. But what I would recommend you doing is thinking about working on your CO2 tolerance. So I have a few techniques that are kind of like for the general public in my book. For you, I would recommend if you could work with a Buteyko teacher, specifically someone who teaches that technique. That is going to be a really good technique for improving your CO2 tolerance. And there's been some evidence to show that will help with asthma. I've been teaching breathwork, Wim Hof method, and all these things for a while. And I've had people with asthma say that after practicing Wim Hof method for a matter of months, then they didn't need their inhalers. Now, I think in the people that I've spoken to, I don't think they had maybe as severe as a case as it sounds like maybe you have. But breathwork is something. Here's the thing. For me, better is better, right? Maybe it's not and I wouldn't say there's like these are cures. These are ways that we can address issues and improve our health, right? So if I can get to where I feel better, that's better. And so I think breath work is definitely a tool. And the nice thing is it's something where you're going to be breathing anyway. And you might as well learn proper breathing format, your breathing mechanics. If you want to get my book, I do go over how to do a breathing assessment, how to do a CO2 tolerance assessment. Those are two really important things for knowing, am I a healthy breather? Is my breathing mechanic or are my breathing mechanics, are they in alignment with what I'm trying to do when I'm breathing? And believe me, I don't care what technique you're trying to do. I don't care what technique you're trying to do. If your breathing mechanics are off, you're not going to get at least you're not going to get the full benefits of the technique. You're going to get probably some, but if you don't have proper breathing mechanics, you can't really expect to get the fullness out of the technique itself. So I don't care what the technique is, you need to have proper breathing mechanics, so a proper breath wave. You'll at least want to understand what your CO2 tolerance is. And I would be willing to bet that that is something that if you worked on, you're going to see some improvements. That's just my own 2 cents, take it or leave it. But I hope that helps. Let's see here. Here's one: how to get over procrastinating doing breath work. And this will be my final one because I got to get out of here. Got to get to my next engagement. But let's talk about this. So procrastination is something I think most of us face. And this is something that when it comes to breath work, it's never been a problem for me when it comes to procrastination. To be honest, ice bathing, which is something I generally do every day, that is generally the one that I procrastinate, and then that will be the one that I end up not doing. Here's the thing about breath work: you're breathing no matter what. So there's no way to wait for that, right? There's no way to say, I will breathe later. And the thing is, I want you to understand, when I say breathing, breath work really, we're constantly informing our central nervous system of our state, and we're constantly making adjustments and sending signals every breath you take. So you're never ever not doing I guess if you the point is, you're never not breathing. So even right now, are you breathing through your nose? Can you pull that breath down to your abdomen? You're doing breath work. Okay. So it doesn't have to be something where you sit down for a half-hour session. It doesn't have to be something like sitting down and going super deep with Wim Hof method. Breath work is something that you do all the time, or you can do at any time. So for instance, I went to the gym. Okay. So after I got done from the gym, I went to a room and I did some breath work. And it was breath work specifically for the purpose of relaxing and calming down. I had just gotten, I got my pump on. And so I did breath work specifically for calming down, calming my nerves, getting into a state of rest and digest, so that the workout I can really benefit from. And that way I'm not taking stress hormones with me the rest of the day. I can get back into my other state. So when it comes to breath work, I would say, don't think you have to do something that is out of this world cosmic in order to start your breathwork practice. And I'm a big fan of small steps over time makes huge results. Okay. And I'm evidence of that, because God knows when it comes to making positive impacts in my life, it's always been a slow and steady thing. And if you just keep with it, you're going to see results. And then the weird thing is, okay, so this is the funny thing. So then people meet you later in life, okay? And they don't realize you're 10 years into all of these things, that it was just a little everyday thing. Just every day you're just limping along, working your way to a full step. Then you can walk, then you can run, then you can dance, right? But then people meet you and then they see you dancing, and they're like, they don't realize how long it took to get there. And that's the thing. It takes some time. So, that's my best advice when it comes to procrastination is do what you can when you can, and then try to build little times in the day where you can do it. I'm still working on this. My meditation practice is something where I'm always vacillating. Sometimes I'm really on it. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm halfway there. Sometimes it's like, man, it's been days since I've actually sat down for a good meditation session. So there's all these things that, you got to, it's a daily struggle. It is a daily battle every day. And let's see, you had a follow-up question. You said, how do you get over the dilemma that breath work would cure all illness? So I think what you're saying is, how do I get over the fact that breath work doesn't cure all illnesses? I think, well, the thing is, we don't want to. It's easy to fall into the lie that there's some kind of a cure-all panacea, just this one trick or this whatever is going to cure all your problems. We all are complete organisms. There are so many aspects to our lives. There are so many aspects to health, to relationships, and all of them play a role in your overall wellness and health. So, to put on any one thing, I guess the pressure that, hey, you need to cure all of my illness is just really not fair to that discipline or practice. And if you ever hear someone say, this will cure all illness, I would be very skeptical, because, illness still pervades. It's something that there will be illness. However, what we have, the beauty is we have a tool that's free, that's always with us, that is very effective. And it is something that you can use to mitigate a lot of these issues, to treat illness, to treat depression, anxiety, and a whole host of other things, indigestion, high blood pressure. All of these things can be treated with breath work. But when it comes to saying cure, there's very few things, that I would never say that. I would just never say that this thing is going to cure all illnesses, but it is something that I would say can help all people. So having said that, guys, thank you so much for being here. I was going to have to call this off because my internet went down in my house and I didn't know when it was going to be back. It took almost 40 minutes for it to come back on. And I really appreciate those of you guys who stuck around, and for those of you guys who popped in to ask questions, thank you so much. If for some reason I didn't get to your question, please come back next week. I'm trying to do these every single week, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I will be posting these. These always go up online, guys. If you're looking for any coaching or anything like that, hit me up. Especially on Patreon right now. I've just opened 10 slots it's kind of a discounted client system. So if you go to Patreon, find my landing page, go to the Patreon page, you can join the Patreon. And I want to thank all of you guys who are already on the Patreon club. It is actually we're a really cool tribe. Like it's a bunch of some guys, some people that are really cool to each other, and it's growing. So thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for all the support, and big thanks to everybody for being here, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for watching. Please, if you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to go out there and be kind to one another. Have a great weekend, everybody. Happy Friday.